It's that desire to get a bit better and to create a more epic picture or something that I want to put on the wall. But of course, as soon as you do that, you want to get better than that, don't you?
Welcome to the Photo Mentors podcast. Each week we speak to a photographer or filmmaker and find out the experiences and advice that make them who they are today. We do this by asking 10 key questions, the same questions to each guest, so that we can find out common themes and compare and contrast how different photographers and filmmakers go about their craft. That voice you just heard is photographer Angela Nicholson, who I'm going to speak to in this episode. Angela describes herself as a photographer, journalist and a reviewer of cameras and photographic equipment, but to me that only really scratches the surface of what she does. A few years back, along with a small group of other photographers, she started Camera Jabber, which is a reviews, news and technique website. But she also founded Sheclicks, which is an online community for female photographers, and at the time of recording it has almost 9,000 members. Previously, Angela has been technical editor at Amateur Photographer magazine and has also been head of testing for Future Publishing, working across magazine titles such as, going to take a deep breath for this, Digital Camera, Professional Photography, N-Photo, Photo Plus, Photography Week and Practical Photography, as well as the Digital Camera World and Tech Radar websites. As usual, I will leave all of Angela's social media links in the episode notes, as well as details on how you can find the Sheclicks Facebook group. Okay, so Angela, let's do some quick questions first, just to find out a little bit more about you. What was your first camera?
Well, this will make you laugh because it sounds quite dated. It was a Kodak Brownie.
Wow.
I'm not that old, honestly, but I bought it for 15p when I was about 9, I think, at a school fete. And I remember I went to Boots with my dad to get a film, and I was absolutely amazed that I could get colour pictures from it. I was so excited. But yeah, I used that for a little while. So that was my very first film camera.
And now things have moved on a tiny little bit from those Brownie days. You're leaving the house right now. What is going out with you? Camera and a lens. You can only pick one lens.
Well, you know what? That's a really tough question because, in all honesty, I always take out what I'm testing. So, like, if you'd asked me a few days ago, I would have said the Sony A7C. If you asked me yesterday, it would have been, and it was the Panasonic S1R, which I was using with the 70 to 300mm lens that they just introduced today. So that's what I've been using. And then, like, a couple of days before that, I was probably using the Z7 II. So it's really hard to say what I use consistently because I'm just continually switching.
Have you got a personal kind of preference
I've got a cupboard down here which has got all sorts of cameras in it. I mean, I guess the question is, if somebody sends me an accessory to test,
yep,
I'd probably say, can you give me it in Sony mount? And
what about lens?
It depends what I'm doing. If I want to really kind of like relax, I might put on a lens baby. Maybe the new Spark.
Oh, well. Yep.
Yeah, because it's just, I find it a really good way of completely zoning out. You go out and you're forgetting about autofocus. You're kind of just going with the flow. I'll probably set it to manual and auto sensitivity, and then you can just shoot away. And you just got to concentrate on the composition and kind of getting the focusing right. But it's a bit different because you're kind of moving around and moving the lens.
Obviously, having tested cameras myself, I know what you have to kind of go through in terms of making sure you've got this shot and you've got that shot and you've got all these other settings. So I guess it's probably almost like having a bit of time off, not having to concentrate too much. Or in the case of a lens baby, worry that anything is sharp or in focus or anything. Maybe it's been a few years since I tested one, I don't know.
Maybe it is. But yeah, I think it's a bit like, I never wore a tie to work, but it's a bit like taking your tie off at the end of the day, just relax and stop worrying about getting everything right, just have some fun. Okay,
so you've got a Sony camera with a lens baby on it. What other non-photographic items are in your camera bag and why, if it needs an explanation?
Well, the thing I tend to slip in, make sure it's always there, is a bin bag. Because I take a lot of low-level shots and I don't like getting covered in mud, so I'll put that on the ground. You can crawl about. And, if it's absolutely chucking it down, and if you're worried that the camera you're testing isn't waterproof, you can always wrap it in that just to keep it safe. So a bin bag. Dog treats. for
Otto. Yep.
For Otto, yeah. And of course, if you've got a dog and you've got dog treats, then you've got to have little poo bags as well.
Okay. Yep. Okay. That's these answers are getting more surreal every single week. I swear. Okay. Bin bag though. We'll go with bin bag. That's actually that's quite a useful one. I do similar. I often have a giant, like one of those clear freezer bags, just as can just quickly pop a hole in one end, and then obviously it seals at the other end. So you've got a quite an easy makeshift kind of waterproof cover if ever you need one. So where are you going to take photographs? What's your favourite place to take photographs? And you can interpret that how you want.
Well, the place I most want to go really at the moment is to the coast, but I live in Oxfordshire, so that's not really an option right now. So, I mean, like everybody at the moment, most of my photography is done within about 5 mile radius of the house. And there's a tree that we tend to refer to as my tree, because I just love photographing it. And I've photographed it with so many different cameras and different lights, different weathers. So I go there quite a lot. I really like it. It's one of those trees where the branches split and then they rejoin. Yeah. And it does that in a couple of places, and it's just so weird. So I like to go and photograph that on a regular basis. Given the choice, to say I'd go to the coast, or I really want to go back to Iceland. Yeah,
I mean, it's got to be top most photographers' landscape photographers list. There's always something new to go and just discover, and the way the country changes throughout the seasons. I've never been in the summer, so I'd love to go and just, obviously you can shoot almost for 24 hours. So I quite fancy that, actually, just not sleeping for 24 hours and see how terrible my photographs get as I get more and more tired or proceed to run out of Red Bull and coffee. And okay, so you're going out. You've just got one bag because you got your bin bag, you got your Sony camera, and you've got your lens baby. But how many camera bags do you own in total?
Well, there's a corner of my office where I kind of stash all the bags and I stack them up. And I was not going to count them, but I thought, I must have a bit of a stab at it. So I got to 20.
Okay.
And then I started measuring. And so we're talking about like a cubic meter of baggage.
Nice.
Because I started measuring it, and then I turned around and saw 3 more bags behind me. And then I remembered I got a couple in the house. So they're still in the house. So it's 20-ish. And I haven't counted Pelly cases.
No, Pelly cases do not count. We had this discussion with Joe in the last episode.
Yeah, I heard that. So I didn't want to go out of bounds.
Okay, that's the basic stuff out the way. Let's crack on with the 10 proper questions. What photographic technique do you wish that you'd have learnt much earlier?
This is quite a tough one. And the first thing that came to mind actually was, I don't know if you class it as a photographic technique, because I was thinking about it. I've used Photoshop from very early on, but I kind of wish that I was a bit more open to Lightroom, because I really feel like I should have got into keywording. And I have had times when I've sort of thought, right, there was a 6-month period where I thought, right, I'm only going to use Lightroom. And I forced myself to do it. And I kind of did a bit of keywording and stuff like that, but it just doesn't feel right. I'm just not comfortable with it. So I think I should have maybe tried a bit harder with that and just tried to get the keywording done. But is that a photographic technique?
No, that can count.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
No, we can go with that. I recently did something similar whereby I think, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but they updated Lightroom so that it could recognise faces and you could tag all the names in it. And of course, the first thing you do is turn that off, because otherwise it searches every single image and it really cripples your system having that running in the background. But I decided enough was enough. Let's do it. And it was days of having it sort of running in the background whenever I was on the computer to search through 41,000 images, looking for faces in each one. And there's weddings in there, and then of course it's picking up people in the backgrounds of shots when you've been doing street photography, so you'll have all your friends and family on there, and then of course there's just 6 random Italians from where you sort of once were out taking photos in Rome that it picks up, and then it suggests that person is one of your friends,
and adverts as well in the background and stuff.
Adverts. I've even had a few statues as well that it suggested there are a few friends of mine. Apologies for the interruption, but I've just got a little favour to ask. If you're enjoying the podcast, really appreciate it if you could hit subscribe, hit like, leave a review wherever you download the podcast from. It is really going to help grow the podcast and help grow this community. So just thank you in advance for doing that. I really appreciate it. Anyway, back to the serious stuff. Mm-hmm. Your best photographic purchase.
Well, again, if you'd asked me about a week ago, I probably would have said Peak Design's Slide Light, which is a strap, which is a bit boring, but it is something I use or have used kind of every day for ages. And firstly, it still looks exactly the same. I had it since it first came out, and it looks exactly the same as when I first got it. I love how easy it is to attach it and detach it, which I know it sounds like a really silly thing, but it's got those anchor links and you just loop them through and then you can just click it off and on. And if you're constantly changing cameras, that's really useful. But about, a week, 2 weeks ago, I started using Wondred's sling strap, and that's kind of stolen its place.
Controversial.
It's really nice. It's removability. It does look smart, but it uses, instead of having the anchor things, it's got a little clip. So it probably takes like a nanosecond longer to clip and unclip, but you take the whole thing off, you don't leave anchor links behind. So if you're swapping between cameras, eventually you come to the point where, I need to take the anchor links off that camera so I can put them on this camera. Yeah. You don't have to do that.
Interesting. I'm going to have to look that up, because obviously you have the same problem when testing stuff. And I went with Peak Design just for that reason. And you've got a load of extra links so that you know, just all the cameras have them on. You put, whenever you get a camera into test, put them on, and it just makes swapping stuff so much easier. It's
true. But if you're doing video, if you're recording, you got the mic on the top of the camera and it's a little bit breezy, you get the anchor links clacking.
Yep.
Don't want that.
No. I mean, it's handy when the other way around, if you're taking long exposures with landscapes, being able to take the strap off as well, so it isn't flapping around in the wind as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Right. What photo have you taken that means the most to you?
Well, I've taken a few photos over my time, and there are some that I really like. There's some I'm proud of, but the one that always kind of pops into my head as being really important, and it keeps, immediately comes to mind, is a picture that I took years ago as myself and my partner John with my mum and dad and our old Labrador that we used to have, Dylan, and we're down in Cornwall at Land's End. And it was one of those images where I think that Land's End was closed, but you could just walk around. And I don't know if you've been there, but there's a post where they've put signs and it says, New York, however, and Land's, what's John O'Groats the other way, and this, that, and the other. And we'd had a fantastic day. We'd been to the Minack Theatre just to check it out. We'd been walking, and I was looking for seals, and we saw a basking shark, and we just had a really, really nice day. And then I set up my tripod, put the camera on it, and we all sat under this post, and it was beep, beep, beep. And the dog looked straight at the camera. And so we're all five of us just sat there sort of smiling and looking at the camera. And Mum and Dad have got a copy of it in their dining room, and we've got a copy of it. We actually printed it in a frame in our dining room. So I think that's the most important image to me.
Isn't it amazing how you just told me a whole story and you can remember every single thing from that day? And there's always a bit of me that thinks, I wonder what bits of that story or what bits of that day I would have forgotten if I didn't have that picture as a reminder, because it takes you straight back, not just to standing there, clicking the self-timer, having the dog look in the camera, but it takes you back to the basking shark and going to the Minack Theatre and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, it's really weird what goes on in our brains to sort of allocate memories to this kind of visual bit of paper that we have in front of us. Yeah.
And as you were saying that, I was thinking, we also had an ice cream.
Do you remember what flavour?
I think it was vanilla and it had a flake in it. But it was a scoopy one. It wasn't a, it wasn't a Mr. Whippy.
When in Cornwall, that's what you have to get. What has been your favourite photographic failure, and what did you learn from it?
This has got easy because I do it quite often. It's self-timer failure. And I think the first time I did it really memorably was sort of connected with the project I was going to talk about. And basically, I don't know, I set it to 2 seconds instead of 10, but I didn't realise it. So basically, you've just got my backside running into the frame. And it was I think it was probably one of my most popular pictures on Facebook. You put it on and everybody likes it because it's just so funny. And what I learned was actually sometimes those mistakes make the actual picture better because everyone's, into the flow. So I've done it when I've gone on, we had a Sheclicks meetup up in the Lake District. And I did that thing of looking, I set up the tripod. We were at Ashness Bridge and I set up the tripod on a rock and everyone was on the bridge. I thought, I can make it in 10 seconds. And I think I had about 5 goes before I realised I could only get about halfway, because it was all, I was jumping from rock to rock. And of course, by the time I moved the camera, zoomed out a bit and reorganised it, everybody was just laughing. So everyone's just got really big smiles. And yeah, so I think it's good. But also it's quite good to let people see that you make mistakes as well. By sharing those pictures, everybody has a laugh and you just seem a bit more human.
So what have you stopped doing and why have you stopped doing it?
Well, I like to think that I've stopped worrying so much about what people think of my pictures. I think it's quite a key issue, isn't it? With people, especially, you and I both worked as amateur photographer, and you've got to try to have a certain level of photography in there, and you're always trying to have a range of pictures and stuff like that. And I've tried to just kind of relax and shoot the stuff that I want to shoot and experiment and enjoy things a bit more.
So what has been your favourite photographic project?
A while ago, I realised that there were no photos of myself and my partner together. There was a lot of photographs of him looking vaguely bored, but there was none of us together. So I started this project where I took a tripod with me wherever we went, and I took a camera and we actually set up a photograph while we were there. So there's like pictures of us at Blenheim Palace, so Blenheim's in the background, and various walkways. So it might just be an ordinary walk, or it might be like we're going to Uffington to see the White Horse. And we actually started to that was built into the trip as well. So actually we started to dress a bit better and make a little bit more effort. And it was just really nice to have the two of us kind of looking slightly posed in front of wherever we'd gone. So that was really, really good. Going back a bit further, like my degree project, my honours project was about women in science. And I didn't really think about it until years later when I started working on Sheclicks, that what sort of drove me to do that was there weren't many women working in science, and I really wanted to celebrate the women who were in science, and I photographed them all standing in doorways. And I got to meet people like Judith Hahn and all sorts of other really eminent female scientists, and then some people I worked with at the time. And they were all just, it was just a really nice thing to do, in that everybody really got it and they were really happy, and there was nice, generally quite smiley pictures. Some people said, oh, do I look serious or do I smile? I said, well, do what you want. But generally smiling makes you look a bit more approachable, so perhaps do that. And most did. So
I'm going to classify Sheclicks, the community that you've set up, actually as another photographic project. There's probably quite a few people who aren't as familiar with it, but do you want to tell us a little bit more about the community, who it's for and what it's about?
Okay. Yeah, so I started Sheclicks as a Facebook group back in August 2018. And the idea was to create a space where female photographers, or a group that female photographers could go to, share their pictures, ask questions, whether they were just starting out using a phone or whether they're experienced pros wanting some tips about, marketing or pricing or something like that, without feeling intimidated or getting shouted down. Because I don't know about you, but there's some Facebook groups you go to and somebody will ask a question about a lens, and it's like they asked who they should murder first, because it's just a horrible place. And there are people who are really, really nice, and they're probably leaving that group as soon as they see the comments. But it's quite an intimidating area to be in. And if you're sharing pictures, it gets a bit boring if you keep seeing the same bikini-clad women. Yeah. And I think guys get bored of that as well. And you want to be able to share something else and say, what do you think of my landscapes? Am I heading in the right direction? And there's all sorts of creative photography as well, ICM going on, intentional camera movement and use of layers and textures and stuff like that you don't get seen. You don't see that very often in magazines and stuff. And I just wanted women to find somewhere where they could share some of that and perhaps build up the confidence to start submitting it to magazines, understand how to get in magazines, all that kind of thing.
No, it's really great. It's been lovely watching it from afar, like seeing just the huge numbers that you've managed to get in that community. And some big name female photographers in there as well, I see, have joined and are contributing. And also you're obviously doing workshops through that as well. Yeah,
they're great fun, actually. It's really nice because what we do, we get a woman who's sort of in the industry or who's a photographer to present on a theme or a subject. And, I host it, and we get fantastic sign up. I mean, we had one, it was about creative flower photography, and we had, I think the maximum we can have is 500. We had 495 people sign up for it.
Wow.
We had 400 actually in the meeting, or in the webinar. So there's a real demand for it. And of course, it gets to the end where it's the Q&A, and you're kind of thinking, well, I wonder how long this is going to take. But it's really nice. And then, of course, you see afterwards loads of photographs being posted on that theme.
Yeah.
So we had one a while ago by Tracy Calder, who does the Close-Up Photographer of the Year. And suddenly you see loads and loads of macro photography. It's really nice. Very inspiring.
Yeah, no, it's really good. If you are a female photographer, go and check out Sheclicks. I'll put all the links to the community in the show notes, so make sure you check them out. What is the worst bit of photographic advice you've ever heard?
Well, as a reviewer, which you are as well, it has to be when somebody suggests somebody else should buy the same camera as they've got. Whatever, regardless of their level of experience. So you've got someone who's, I don't know, who's got a 5D Mark IV, and they're talking to someone who's saying, I'm going to buy my first camera. What should I buy? And it's, oh, you want a 5D Mark IV. It's the best one. And you need a 2470 2.8 and blah, blah, blah. And well, firstly, they're probably not wanting to invest that much money. But secondly, if they pick that camera up, they're just going to be horrendously intimidated by all those buttons and dials. And maybe you need to think a little bit more about the sort of camera that they might be willing to start out with. Because very few of us went out and bought a pro level camera as our first camera. I mean, I said mine was a 15p Kodak Brownie.
What would you advise now in terms of what to look for? So somebody's going out and buying their first, let's say they're stepping up from a smartphone, the classic one, and they want to take things more seriously, in quotation marks. What would you suggest would be the most kind of important thing that they look for?
These days, as a rule, I tend to recommend that they go for a mirrorless camera, because I think when you've got the electronic viewfinder, it makes such a difference being able to see what you're going to get. So if you've accidentally put it in black and white mode, or you've switched to black and white mode yesterday and you've forgotten when you pick it up, you see it. And if the image is going to be underexposed or overexposed, you see that too. And you can, you're not kind of looking through an optical viewfinder and clicking away and then looking at your pictures. I don't understand why these are black or why these are completely overexposed. But I would always ask somebody what sort of photography they want to do. And I think that's one of the questions that people tend to get a bit irritated by when you go into a shop and they say, what you want to photograph. But it's an important part of the process, really, kind of trying to understand what the things are important to you. So if you want to be carrying a camera over a long distance, maybe you're actually wanting something quite compact. Might even be a compact camera without an interchangeable lens, with a fixed lens. Things like whether touch control is important to you, whether you want a vari-angle screen, tilting screen, or whether there's something really, if you're going to be shooting sport all the time, the chances are you're going to be looking through a viewfinder and you're not really worried about having a tilting screen or whatever. So it's just important to get those kind of decisions. Just think about those kind of things, really.
What are you currently learning, or what was the last thing that you've learned? During
the first lockdown, I decided to increase the number of Sheclicks webinars from, they were roughly monthly, to what turned out to be weekly. And so there was a sudden acceleration in the learning experience of using Zoom and webinars. And we also, suddenly everybody else seemed to catch up. People who weren't happy with video conferencing and that kind of thing, suddenly started asking me where the Zoom link was. So rather than doing it through Facebook, we're doing it through Zoom. So I started using the webinar service. So that's really useful. But from a more sort of photographic point of view, I've been learning more about video. I don't know, I really enjoy shooting video, and I find editing it really, really absorbing. But we spoke earlier about being reviewers, and you get buttoned down and you're kind of trying to test what a camera does and can it do things accurately. But sometimes I think what's more interesting with video is actually trying to capture the mood or create mood. And that's where the grading comes in. And I think trying to think beyond, I know, I'll go with orange and teal. Do something a bit different. And that's kind of, I'm still trying to get my head around that. I mean, I know the mechanics of it. It's more the kind of the decision-making process. I shot a video for a local cafe to try and help them as we were coming out of one of the lockdowns. I forget which one it was. And you kind of try to think, well, what's an appropriate style for this? And we kept it fairly simple, to be honest. But then there's another cafe we've been promising to do one for months, and they're a bit sort of younger. So we're trying to think of doing something a bit funky, but we're not trying to make it look like some sort of, I don't know, crack den. We want to
Is that what the kids do these days?
Yeah, they all go to crack dens and they drink the milky coffees.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I also, when you something Damien said a couple of weeks back, which was kind of like, you find in video, it's all exactly the same as what we're doing in photography, obviously, except for moving images. They've just changed the name of everything. So like you go on to like the color grading panel in Premiere, or don't get me started on DaVinci Resolve. I haven't got a clue about all those little modules. And I'm just like, no, but you go into Premiere and kind of like, I'm familiar with these kind of the premise of these color sliders and what they're doing, but why are they split into 3 different sections? And there's, it gets quite mind-boggling. And that's like you say, before you've even started any kind of creativity and worked out exactly what you want to do. And I find often I'll end up editing a video so that I want it to look like some of my stills, and it just doesn't work. You can't bump the saturation up, and you can't bump the local contrast up. It just looks ridiculous. And I generally just try these days just to get it right in camera, because those guys have created a setting for that reason, because you don't know what you're doing. And then just a little tweak of the contrast or whatever.
But it's nice to play around.
Yeah, definitely.
And try and create something a bit different. And again, that's something that I've done, where I sort of moved on from photographing John and I together at things. I started videoing a day out. So I started with a little Osmo Pocket, and then you sort of think, before you know it, I've got a Crane 2S and I realised I walked around with something like 3 kilograms of, I took it on a 5-mile walk. You said anything, I thought my arms felt a bit sore, but you want to get this, you get more and more ambitious, don't you? You want to get that stable shot and do the spin around and all that kind of thing.
So who or what has been the biggest influence on your photography?
I've decided I'm a bit of a sponge, actually. I think it changes depending on what's happened. So there was a phase when Annie Leibovitz was quite a big influence on me. And I think that was very much connected with the project I mentioned with the Photographing Women in Science, because she did a lot of books photographing women and created some amazing images. But actually, I don't shoot a huge number I shoot very few portraits these days. And I tend to get really inspired by things that I've just encountered. So a week or so ago, I spoke to a photographer called Lorenz Holder, who is a sports photographer, but he doesn't do that classic kind of in tight shots. He does much kind of more epic shots. So in some cases, he tends to do a lot of snowboarding. The snowboard is really small in the frame, but they're, and he's got a massive, great satellite dish, and it's just a real sense of scale and drama. And he shoots a lot at night using flash, so that he might create a silhouette or he injects colour. And I found that really inspiring, because in some ways his images look really stripped down and simple, but obviously there's a lot more going on in there. Yeah.
Interesting one. I wasn't expecting you to pick a sort of sports photographer.
Well, that's a new one. I mean, actually, I like shooting sport, but I mean, it was just his take was different. Yeah. And that really inspired me. Also, it coincided with, I got the Profoto A10 in to test. And so I'd got in the habit of just shoving it in my pocket and going out, because just get a little bit of light and, try and darken the background a little bit, try and basically take more epic looking shots of Otto. And it's great fun. And I was sort of starting to think, I want to do a bit more flash photography again. And then I saw this guy's work and I thought, oh yeah, that's amazing. I probably won't be shooting snowboarders, to be honest, in South Oxfordshire, but it's kind of inspired me to think about using flash in a slightly different way.
Does Otto have his own Instagram account?
Of course he does.
And I'll make sure I put that in the show notes as well, obviously.
Excellent.
So we can see some of these flash images at work. So the final question, after the last couple of weeks of saying it, I'm actually going to rephrase it. So rather than why do you keep taking photos, which has created a laugh as if I'm sort of saying, why bother? It's now is, what is your motivation to keep taking photographs?
I still think I could get better. I still think that, I think that's why I keep going back to that tree, because I still think that there's probably an angle or a lighting condition that I could get better shots in. So I've been taking the flash that I was talking about. I've been taking that there. I haven't quite cracked it yet. But yeah, it's that desire to get a bit better and to create a more epic picture or something that I want to put on the wall. But of course, as soon as you do that, you want to get better than that, don't you? I remember years ago talking to a wildlife photographer, and he said when he sees a new species, he allows himself, I think it was 2 photos, because everybody wants to record it, but then he tries to do something a bit different. And I think that's a really good take on things. It's like when you go to Rome, you want to get all those classic shots, but then maybe you want to get something a bit different as well, because they're new to you. You might be able to buy a postcard with them on, taken in better lighting, but it's a new scene to you. Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Is there a time when you've got a photo? Do you ever think, yep, that's it, I'm done now? I don't need to photograph that subject again.
I can't see that happening, to be honest. No, I think it's unlikely. Because it's that thing where you keep going, isn't it? With, when you do painting with light, and you think, well, I'll just do this for an hour.
Oh, God,
and then 4 hours later, you think, oh, the batteries have gone.
That's it. You keep shooting until you run out of batteries, and that's when you know it's time to call it a night, basically. Yeah, I've done that quite a few times.
And the worst is long exposures, because they're getting longer and longer and longer, and then you sort of think, well, I'll just do one more because that wave might do that or whatever. And it's because it's variable. You just keep going and going. So I think it's unlikely, to be honest. I'll just keep doing it.
I think that's the perfect place to end it. Not because, 1, that was a nice sentence, and 2, that was the last question. So I'm all out of questions now. Angela, it's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been great. Thanks very much, Rich. Really good to see you.
And that's it. We're done. Another episode. If you liked it, then please hit subscribe. And of course, we will be back very soon with the next episode. Thanks for listening.